Well, hello everyone. I am here with the most understanding guest in history. We were scheduled for 10:30 this morning, and I had, as everybody knows, I had sort of emergency dental surgery last week. I haven't been able to chew food for days, and I had to go. The only appointment I could get this week to deal with that was this morning. And I knew, I could tell. They were like, "We'll get you out by this time and you'll be home." And no, that's not the truth. So Stephen File is on with me, and we're just gonna chat a little bit here as people file in to the live, just because it's nice to have a couple people on. And then we're going to record the podcast. This goes out on Sunday's podcast this coming weekend. But if you're on it and you jump into the live, then you get to see it live. So, for those of you who like to be ahead of the game, you're going to be ahead of the game. Stephen, are you excited to be on the show today?
Yes, I'm very excited. Glad to be on a live stream as well.
So. How long has it taken us to get you on? Like a month? 2 months?
Something like that, but it's good timing. I had a chance to take a break today, and it's good to talk and not just be staring at a computer screen, writing stuff up. So I get to actually interact. So it's good.
It is nice, huh? Those of you who have joined the live, if you don't mind putting it out on my social that we're live, I was originally going to go live at 11. It's 11:30. We're a half hour late. So it can always help. It can always help to let people know. Okay, so what we're going to do here is a 5-second pause like we always do, guys. I'm going to tell Stephen, welcome to the show, and then we're going to get this conversation going. Of course, as always, if you have questions, first couple words in all caps really helps me. So let's do this. So welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, Nicole.
I love it when I get tongue-tied at the beginning of these. Okay, so who or what is a Stephen File, and what has brought you to the Living Free in Tennessee podcast today?
Yeah. What is a Steve File?
What is a Steve File? Are you a Steve or a Steven?
He is a mystic beast. I usually go by Steve. Those who know me usually call me Steve, so I cut the N off, just make it easy. But yeah, so I am here in Central Texas in Hill Country. And what brought me here is just wanting to share the news of what my wife Kelsey and I's business does and how we can help people truly live free, because we are devoted to that. And we run a little business here in Texas called Strategic Home Defense. And we help people protect their assets and protect what matters most. Their most important asset, that's their lives, right? So that's really what we do. We just educate and empower people, one family, one person, one homestead at a time. Whatever it takes.
Well, I was really impressed when I met you at the Exit and Build Land Summit, and you were right on it on your booth the whole time, which a lot of people go do booths at those things and then you never find them there. And that meant that I got to chat with you a little there. And I would say my audience, I have a lot of closet defense people in my audience, but a lot of them think a lot more about like the food raising parts of things and starting business. So why would somebody want to consider what their strategic home defense looks like?
Yeah, so, the biggest thing is the day-to-day, because especially for the people that maybe haven't invested into land and things like that, and they're working on getting out of maybe a bigger metro area, something you need to take seriously because the likelihood of crime to take place in your home is much higher, obviously, the more dense the population is. And the thing is, the more independent you get, the worse things get in the world, the more of a target you become because you grow your own food, you have your own animals, you have your own wells, you create your own power. You're a target to everybody. And, the world's getting to a point where people are going to panic and people are going to be looking for food. So you don't want to completely be, cut off from people because you want people to pitch in and help. And there's people you care about. But you also need to realize that not everybody in the world's good and not everybody has good intentions. So we kind of, have a different spin where there's so many experts out there to help you build real hard assets, like being self-sustaining, super important. But we also have to remember that the world's not perfect and we got to have a way to protect it because there may be a time where nobody's coming to help. It's just you. So that's kind of our overall goal is just to help people to lock down those assets and not let them be vulnerable.
So, something you may not know about me is I lived in a pretty rough neighborhood in Portland, Oregon before I moved to Tennessee. like to the point where there was gunfire out in front of my house. The bullets went into my neighbor's home, did not hit him or his 5-year-old son because they were on the ground when they jumped to the ground. And that put me on a very long path towards crime prevention through community action in Portland, Oregon. And then, and at that time, I did not have a firearm in my house. And I remember friends wanting me to have it, but I was not trained in any of that. And I felt that having the firearm was worse if I didn't know how to use it
Mm-hmm.
than to have it and not know how to use it and have it used against me. And so that whole time I went through that part of my life, almost got raped once. And what got me out of it was my attitude. Like there was no physical getting out of it, but I psyched the guy out. And I, multiple break-ins, that sort of thing. And when I moved to Tennessee and got to the country, it was the first time I got serious about, well, maybe I do need to defend myself with a firearm, and starting to
Mm-hmm.
train. And what was different between Portland, Oregon and living in DeKalb County, Tennessee, is that we have a giant county with two like sheriffs on duty, or two, whatever they're called, deputy sheriffs at any given time, which means if they happen to be nearby and something happens and you call the police, they might get there in 15 minutes. It's much more likely 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And I realized
Absolutely.
anything that happens is up to me to deal with. So what are your thoughts on sort of why start building these skills into your life, and
Mm-hmm.
like how that changes city versus country?
Yeah, it really, first of all, it's going to empower you. I mean, knowledge truly is, and knowledge that you can apply truly is power. Continue to build off it, because it's something that you can always learn more about. You can always get more proficient in being a farmer. You can always get more proficient in self-defense, whether it be marksmanship or doing some, type of physical training or jujitsu or something like that. There's always something to learn to better yourself and empower yourself. So the limits, there is no limit on being self-reliant. There's always something to learn. So that's why I think it's so important for people to realize that. And it's not there are good people out there in those jobs, sheriffs, deputies, and things. And my wife and myself come from a law enforcement background, but we know the reality that even with ones that are well trained and are good, it could be 45 minutes till you're getting help. You don't have 45 minutes if someone's trying to kick your door in, if they're really wanting to get in there. So why not take the extra time, even if it's once a month or a couple times a year or once a week, doing stuff to empower yourself to know, okay, if I have to deal with this situation, I have a plan, not just going to the range and shooting a paper target or some steel targets, but do I actually have a plan to know how to deal with a threat? Am I going to know that I have firearms placed in the right place around the house? Do I have ammo? Are they loaded? Do I have the right type of ammo? What do I do if that threat's armed? Do I know what's actually cover inside of my home? Because most homes don't have a lot of cover. They may have objects that would be between you and somebody else, but not a lot of them provide a lot of ballistic protection. So,
Oh, come on. You can hide behind a couch and you will not
yeah,
get shot, right?
yeah, nice little thin interior door will stop some, some little metal projectiles going 3,000 feet per second. So,
Yeah.
there's so much out there that it's all we do is we kind of just open Pandora's box and open people's minds to this is all there is. You're just getting your feet wet, because pushing yourself, all we're helping you do is kind of pick the lock of the door to see what's all there. And you can pick and choose what you want to learn. But there's a lot to be said for there may not be help coming. And even if it is, it could be a long time.
So when we talk about strategic home defense, the first place most of our minds go are firearms. Is it just guns, or what is it? What does that look like when you come into to advise somebody on getting ready to defend their home if they need to?
Yeah, so we actually take a little bit different approach. So we start from the outside in. When we do our consultations for people, we look at the overall picture. So a lot of our clients may be looking to relocate. So we look at population density, access to the property. Is there only one way in and out of the neighborhood? Because a lot of people think that's a great thing. I'm like, well, if you need to get out and your property is compromised, it's not necessarily a good thing. So just different things to look at. And if they're like, hey, this is where we're going to stay, this is where we're going to be, okay, what can we do to prevent anybody from even getting in your house? Because the goal is to not have to use those skills. But if the time comes and they're not smart enough to give up, that you're in a position to win that fight if you have to. So that's kind of how we start. So we start at those layers. How can we deter somebody from getting in? How do we provide as much concealment so people can't see what assets you have, whether that be food, vehicles, recreation stuff, whatever you have on your property.
Piles of gold. I have piles of gold.
Piles of gold sitting out in the field. And, make sure they can't get in. So how can we reinforce doors and windows so you don't look like you live in a prison, but it still just makes that access that harder to get in. So it's not just a soft target. Most homes are very soft targets. So, and then we get into the firearm stuff and the tactics, the fun stuff. But it's very important, but we try to prevent that from ever being needed. But that's why we do the training. So if you need it, it's there.
Right. Where do canines enter in?
So canines are really, really valuable. My wife is actually a canine handler. We have one of her dogs who retired. Very valuable. There's a lot of misconceptions about dogs. Not being a handler myself, or just being around a handler and a lot of other handlers, is that people think, oh, I have a dog, they'll protect me. Not necessarily true, especially if they're not a naturally protective breed or they're not trained in bite or perimeter checks and different things like that. The dogs can be trained on. They have almost endless possibilities, especially like shepherd breeds and Malinois have a lot of potential. But they have to be active and they have to be trained. It's just like a person. You can shoot every day for 3 years and become an expert marksman, but if you take a break for 5 years, you're not going to be as good as you were when you're shooting every week, multiple times. We're mammals just like they are, and we require repetition to get better. So just having a nice golden retriever that's friendly and loves the kids, not necessarily mean he's going to put his life on the line to protect you. So we do highly recommend, if you want to have a dog for personal protection at your home, or if you have a big property line, they will patrol. You can train dogs patrol property lines or fence lines, but they need to be trained. You can't just expect a domesticated pet to do what a true trained protection dog would do.
Yeah, I think my perspective on dogs, and you were at Self-Reliance Festival, so you met Joel Riles there, who has the protection animals. And I was surprised to hear that most dogs won't bite.
They won't. He's right on. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, so this year, a friend of mine was in a terrible motorcycle accident. He and his wife end up at the hospital, and I need to go to their house to make sure the dogs are fed, who are German Shepherds, which is a protective breed, mm-hmm. who I've met, 4 times. They don't really know who I am. And I walk it, and they're not trained to bite. And I walk in that house, and one of them came at me, very intimidating. And the minute it saw I didn't back down, it turned around and went and hid under the bed.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, when faced with a 150-pound German Shepherd coming at you, are not going to stand there and be like, hey, name, how's it going? Right. And so when I think about strategic home defense, I think there's that very real, if something happens, you've got to fend it off. And then it seems like there's a vast amount of head game that you can play.
Absolutely.
And just having something that barks probably scares most people who don't know that dogs mostly don't bite.
Yeah, it does. Like I tell people, even if your dog's not trained and you're not going to invest the money in it, you at least have an alarm that's your friend. So
yeah,
and it's not
friendly alarm.
Yeah, not that I don't have to charge it or pace it. Yeah, I got to feed the thing and give them water and play with them, but they're usually great alarms. Even like people are like, I have a 20-pound little terrier or something. I'm like, hey, it'll let you know if somebody's there. And it's kind of one of those things where you kind of just have to know what you're going to get out of it, right? If you're going to invest thousands of dollars and train a dog, they're probably going to do pretty well if they need to act. But if they're just a pet, they can be an alarm, and that's good. Always having something that can warn you and give you time, because time is power. Having the time to formulate a plan and act, especially it's 2:00 in the morning, you're waking up, you don't know what the hell's going on, and you have time to get yourself together, get what you need, and deal with the issue at hand, and not be having to react in half a second. So anything that can give you time is valuable.
Yeah. So, what does your typical customer look like who comes to you? Do they already have things in place, or are they usually starting fresh? Like, how does that usually work for you?
Um, Most of our customers we're seeing, I would say probably 75% have something in place. Like they're not completely blind. They
Mhm.
either have a firearm, have, at least been through some basic, firearms training, or have bolstered their door frames or their locks, and, maybe have surveillance or motion sensors. They have something in place, but they're just looking for more. They know they don't have the whole picture. I would say a lot of our clients are kind of in that, where they've kind of got their foot in the water. They're ready to jump in and take their preparedness a little more seriously. But we do have quite a few clients that are just they're like, I just bought a gun yesterday and I don't
Mhm.
know where to put it, what ammo to use. I don't even have a holster. Like they just need a complete overhaul, which is great. It's, we love the variety to help everybody, especially with Austin not far from us. We get a lot of people that are like, I just got a gun. I have never had one. I'm 40 and I bought my first gun. So
Mhm.
we do experience that a good amount as well, but not the majority of our clients though.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people in the last 2 years who have gotten their first gun, and that is literally what happens. I just chose one, and now I've never shot it. What do I do next? And, and the answer is go learn how to shoot it without shooting yourself or anybody else. That's
Exactly.
very important. There are lots of people who will volunteer their time to do that for you, which is interesting. But then
Mhm.
beyond that, I have not done high stress gun training. I've done high stress emergency medical training at Tactical Response, and your dexterity goes to crap when
Mhm.
they really dial it up, which is so I'm like, how does that work with a gun?
It's interesting. So one thing I've always seen, and anyone else who's been in any type of shooting or been in combat or anything would probably tell you the when you have it's really easy. I know so many guys and gals that when we're even moving or shooting steel targets, man, they're the best in the world, hundreds every time. But once the stuff coming back at you changes things a little bit, you go from a 100% shooter to probably a 20% shooter or 30% shooter, because you add in the stress, the adrenaline, the risk of actually dying, right? Because at the range, typically there's not, unless it's a
Not
really
a huge
safe
risk.
range, there's nobody shooting back at you. So that adds a lot in. So anything you could do to replicate that as close as possible is just going to make you more prepared, because you'll see, in shooting, somebody will shoot. They're like, oh my gosh, that guy got in a shootout with this guy and he shot him 19 times. And like, that's really not surprising, because it can go like that. And anything you can do to add that stress level, and whether it be when we do scenarios in the home, we have a family member that's injured. And a lot of times people will go directly to help that family member while there's still an active threat inside their home, and they totally forget that there's somebody else in there, that if I go to treat this person first, not only am I going to get killed, but the rest of my family is going to die because I didn't deal with the threat first. So being able to make those decisions, because even making it in training is hard. So
Yeah.
we don't want people their first time, God forbid they ever have to make that decision. It's not when it's real and there's someone actually bleeding out in the ground. The first time they're making that decision is in a safer environment where they have that half second to say, okay, I know it hurts, but I need to push past this, deal with the threat. Because if the threat's not dealt with, I can't help anybody.
Mhm.
So being able to make those decisions is the hard part. Yeah.
Okay, so let's back up. Let's say I'm a total newbie.
Yep.
I don't know anything. I haven't even bought my first gun. I come to you and say, "Yikes, help. I need a plan." Like, what's the first step? What do you do first?
So the first thing, is provide education to them as well. So, and just to the bare basics of, how do I even, okay, let's see this firearm. Does it even fit you? Does it even
Mhm.
fit your hand? Is it a handgun? Is it a shotgun? Whatever it is. Okay. If you bought this, did you do any research on the type of ammunition it uses? What's available? And after that, we'll go into, let's break this thing down and know how to take care of it, right? Because even a car, you may not know how to fix everything on your car. You're at least going to know, okay, that's where I fuel it up, to put air in the tires. I know how to change the oil, the basics to keep it running, change out an air filter. we kind of run them through that with that new firearm. Let's
Mhm.
get you comfortable with this, because if you're not comfortable holding it, you're not going to be comfortable using it and actually engaging it and feeling, smelling the gunpowder and feeling, the projectile leave the barrel. You're not
Did
going
you
to be
know
comfortable.
guns are loud?
What's that?
Guns are loud.
I know they're scary.
Super loud. And we always train with earplugs in for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. But are you going to have time to put earplugs in
No.
when somebody breaks into your house?
No, absolutely not. I can tell you right now, you're not going to, and you're not going to even think about
Hold
it.
up! I'm putting my earplugs in.
Yeah,
Just stay right there. Don't move.
let me get my Pelotor headset, get it on, get the audio set right. Like, you're not going to have time for that. So you're going to have auditory exclusion. Like, even at the range, like in training, I've seen people get auditory exclusion running through scenarios where they don't hear certain things.
Yeah.
They hear one person saying something, but they don't hear somebody crying out that there's a threat in another room. And just, it's very interesting how the mind works in those types of situations, just from noise, not necessarily from legitimate stress.
Mm-hmm. So somebody comes new to you, you say, okay, let's go back. Let's see what's the best fit for you, for
Mm-hmm.
your situation, and now learn how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do audits of the home, or how does that work?
Yeah, so what we do, like for one of our on-site evals, we basically do an entire workup, and we poke holes in their entire, like, tell me what you have in place, what is good. We'll check out the entryways, the windows, everything, the layout, where's your safe room, different types of things. And we give them a plan to revamp everything. And there may be some things in place that are great. And our recommendation may be, don't mess with this at all. Here's a few ways you can make it better, but kind of leave it. If it's not broken, don't mess with it. But we give them a whole plan to revamp their security, and also give them an emergency plan, especially if they have family members in the area that they're in close communication with. Like if there's a bad situation, civil unrest and things like that, and maybe you're close to a higher populated area, you need to get out of it. How do we get out of it and dodge high traffic areas, dodge interstates, things like that? How do we get out to a bug out location with the people that we trust and we can rely on? So we kind of go from the whole way from keeping people out, making it better, to if we're in a position we can't win, how do we get the heck out of here, without losing our lives?
Mm-hmm. And then on the practical in your home or homestead standpoint, I'm sure you're covering escape routes as well there.
Absolutely. And that includes, we've had properties we've looked at that are 50 to 100 acres where it's, hey, what's the best area that where drones can't see?
Mm-hmm.
Google Map satellite pictures aren't going to see, that we can have another trail, whether that means we got to get out on side by sides to get out of here, or it might not be a full, vehicle, or it could be on foot, so how do we get out and have enough room to carry what we need to survive, and get out of here? Because that's a very real possibility that you may have to leave. So.
Yeah. And if you have to stay, then that's a whole nother ball game. How do you address in training? This is a question my mom asked me, because I have not been carrying in the regular world very often, very much. Like I've had a gun for home defense, don't take it with me to town, but I do now. And part of that has been, well, if I have this thing and don't know how to use it, then it's that same thing, right? Not enough training.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if I need the thing and don't have the thing, then that's a problem too, right? So she has, my biggest problem was that holsters are terribly uncomfortable for the female body.
That is very true.
And
very true.
And I finally found one that is not uncomfortable, and that's super exciting. So I've started carrying the gun, and my mom, who is not a gun person, started just asking me questions, and she's like, what kind of training have you done to be able to even use that against somebody? Because her perspective is, I can't imagine in any situation pulling a gun out and blamming somebody. So can you talk a little bit about mindset and how you address the mental part of defending yourself? Because I think that's probably a bigger hurdle than any of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mindset is it really comes down to the situation you're in. And I'll tell you right now, you're never want to be the person that goes to look for a conflict, right? But if it finds you, you need to have a plan to, first of all, get out of the situation. Because our first thing should be, if I'm not like under the threat of deadly force and someone wants to invoke a confrontation, I'm going to leave.
Hmm.
If I'm in a position where it's not easy to do, or maybe I have my kids with me or something like that, and I got to act. So I know that there's people that rely on me. So that, first
Hmm.
of all, is the most motivating thing for me. It's not just my life, because I obviously want to live as long as possible
Yeah.
and be in this life. But if if there's somebody else relying on me, that's the biggest motivator for me. That if I'm not doing something to prepare myself to win that, I mean, I'm really letting them down as a father. You know, is that they're not in the position to protect themselves. So if I'm not setting myself up to win, I mean, what am I doing? That's why anywhere I go, um, I mean, I'm armed. I mean, just that's just the way it is. Like I said, if you can get out of the situation, obviously get out, and that's the kind of mindset you have to have is surviving and living and thriving is winning. That is winning, and I want to win. And if once you've been in a situation, where that could be a threat, or you've ever been in a situation where you're not in control, or somebody's assaulted you, and it may not be they had a weapon or something, but someone's assaulted you and you're not in control of the situation, changes your mindset a little bit. And whether you've come out on top or not, that will change things and how you kind of see those scenarios going down. I mean, you have to be willing to um, make the decision. I mean, I there's nothing else I value more than like coming home to my kids. So I know that I'm going to do that. Whether that means I have to plug somebody full of holes, I hope it doesn't come to that. But if that's what it comes to, we'll make it happen. And the big thing too, especially carrying concealed and carrying in public, is making sure you train with that holster. A lot of people don't. A lot of
Hmm.
people do not train with those concealed holsters. They'll get their nice gun belt and go to the range. They got their little drop leg or their nice holster. I'm like, that's cool. I said, but are you carrying that around when you go to Walmart or you go to the movies with your kids? I'm like, oh no. Like, you need to train with that concealed holster so you know the time delay, because you're not going to draw that.
It's like lift my
Fast draw.
shirt up,
Yeah,
grab the thing.
exactly.
As a woman, like carrying under a dress is a whole nother
Exactly. You may
delay.
have the fanny pack. I tell the girls are always in workout clothes. I'm like, get you a nice fanny pack, and there's holsters you can make to attach to that thing, and you can draw those faster than a normal holster. They're actually
Yeah.
pretty awesome. But there's always a way. There's no excuse to not carry.
Yeah,
Um,
we were kind of joking today that the Wild West, where you could just carry it on your hips, was a lot easier from a defense standpoint. Everybody knew you had it, but
yeah,
there it was, ready to go.
yeah. Now people, you'll hear some people like, oh, if people, carry open carry, they're dumb. They're just letting people know that. I'm like, I don't really care either way, because I'm like, I'm in Texas. You can open carry a rifle if you want in Texas. So
Yeah.
I've seen people just walking down the street with a rifle slung. I don't think it's ever, because it's Texas. Everybody has a gun. Like, literally, even the people that you wouldn't think have guns have guns. So it's a very different. Like, I grew up north uh, in Pennsylvania and grew up in a city. It was very, very different.
Yeah, well, how does that, like, how do cultural opinions about guns impact how you would interact in a particular region? And my example is, in Portland, Oregon, it would, like, people are terrified of guns generally.
Yeah,
And I'm sure there are people carrying there. I know there are people carrying there, but if somebody walked down the road with a hunting rifle on their shoulder in camo on their way to go hunt turkeys, that would be, I mean, that person would probably get shot by
yeah,
the police. Uh, but here in rural Tennessee, I'm walking on a hiking trail and I see some guys come walking by in camo with hunting rifles. I don't even think it doesn't even occur to me that they're going to shoot me or do anything bad. I'm like, hey, did you find any turkeys? And they're like, no, but we're going to try again later. And so
hmm
how does that impact how you would train somebody to interact?
yeah. I mean, that's really, really good point and really important to bring up, because we get questions like this, and they're like, if someone gets in my house, do I just, or they're trying to kick in my door, do I just shoot them? I'm like, listen, it's all about how you articulate things as well, and get familiar with where you live, the code of criminal procedure or the penal code. There is, I guarantee every state has it. You have to read in there and be familiar with the use of deadly force and self-defense. Because if you can articulate that it's self-defense, it's a justifiable homicide, you are in fear for your life, you need to understand how to articulate that and not be just because you see, I see someone in my yard, I'm not just going to pot shot them from 200 yards away. Like, that's just not, I'll maybe let the dog go out with me and be like, hey man, you can't trespass here. Like, I don't know who the hell you are. Right. But maybe you're in a more urban area. And that's why I tell people, like, you need to know the gun laws there. If there's a guy walking down the street and he has a handgun in an open holster, a holster on his belt, and you're in Texas, that's completely legal. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you see a guy, walking down the 337 loop in New Braunfels, Texas, and he's got a rifle slung on his back, he's completely legal. There's nothing wrong. So knowing the law is really important, and not just assuming what it is, especially if you move to a new area. That's really important to know. Because I'll tell you right now, it's nothing to go to a barbecue joint here and not see 15 people open carrying a handgun. It's very common, especially in the central area in Texas, like outside of the big cities. It's very common.
Yeah. And I think urban rural makes a big difference too.
Yeah.
On that.
Absolutely.
That's, again, walking around the hall or seeing somebody with a gun on their hip is what it is, right?
That's another day in paradise.
We have rattlesnakes here that you're not supposed to shoot. But if a rattlesnake's going after you, then, which they usually don't, they usually go away from you. Yeah. People are going to do what people do, I'm sure. So, okay. So we have some questions coming in from the audience, and this is a good one. Would you suggest training for the whole family or just the leader of the family unit? Would just a parent doing the training of the family be sufficient?
Good question, Josh, and a very common one. I honestly, as long as your partner's on board and your children are old enough to comprehend, I honestly recommend everybody being involved. Because you might not be home when something happens. So having that plan in place, and having your spouse know what to do if you're not home, and if you're both home, that's even better because you both get trained to deal with the threat. Now you have a team, and it's not just one person on your own and the other person panicking, right? So if you can work together, and especially maybe you have older kids, I absolutely think they should be involved, and give them a role. That may be, hey, get your brother, get your younger brother, your younger sister, get them locked down in this area of the house, and that's their role. And you don't do anything until dad comes to get you, or, whatever your plan's going to be. And it's really good because if you need to get those kids locked down in another area of the house, or like your master bedroom's the safest spot, one of you can cover while the other person extracts the kids and gets them back to that safe area. So I think involving as many people in the family that live there as possible is really valuable. And it's a lot of fun. It ends up being a really cool experience because it's something that you can take later down the road and say, hey, a couple times a year, we're going to rehearse this just in case we all know what our job is. And it's not a surprise if something happens.
Yeah. When I was a kid, we had actual fire drills at my house where I had to climb out the window to get out of the house when I was like 6 or 7 years old. Yep. And because the other question is, when is old enough? Well, old enough is the minute that the kid is mature enough, which is not necessarily an age, to be able to follow a function and know what to do. That could be 3 years old.
Yeah.
If what they need to do is get under their bed and stay quiet.
Yep.
Right. And, finding a way to balance how to do that without terrifying the child, of course, is one thing. But at the same time, if you're running scenarios for fire and don't talk to strangers, it seems like if running scenarios, if somebody breaks in, this is what you do to stay safe, is not a bad thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely valuable. I mean, anything you can add to prepare them, and it may be just something that I provide you, or that's part of your family plan. It may not just be me coming to you as a stranger. Hey, little guy, this is what you do. But at least so the parent gets the education. And hey, these are things that you can provide your child, so that when you guys rehearse stuff, they have a role. And honestly, they're going to love it. Like, my kids are not much older than that, and they know what to do if certain things happen. Like, they feel like they're part of the team. Like, they get fired up about it.
Yeah.
Like, we're getting ready. If we have to deal with a bad guy, we know what our job is. So if they're at the point where they can follow basic instruction, maybe not be involved in the entire training, but let them at least get a taste of it, I think is and that's up to the parent, whatever they decide is appropriate for their kid. But there's a lot to be said. Kids are smart; they pick up stuff quick, and when they're included and feel like they're part of the plan, they're going to take it seriously. They are.
Yeah, we were talking the other day, like the Little Rascals, like that TV show, which is super
Mm-hmm.
old. They were very young.
Mm-hmm.
They were like 5, 6, 7. And think about what those kids were doing out in the world as part of that show. And I think sometimes we underestimate what our children are capable of as far as participation in household important things, which can be anything from keeping the house clean and the food on the table and the animals
Mm-hmm.
cared for, and what to do in a crisis, because crisis happens. If a tornado comes, if somebody breaks in, if there's a flood, if mom gets sick and has to go to the hospital and it's sudden in the middle of the night, which happens, right? It's very interesting to me that we want to shelter them from the fear, and I understand that, but at the same time, if we shelter them too much, what we're enabling is a child that later in life has trouble functioning in a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And crisis happens. I mean,
Yeah.
I may go my whole life without a bad dude breaking into my house and doing something, right? But I'm probably not going to go my whole life without a crisis of some sort.
Yeah. There will be being able to handle diversity and physical struggle as well. Like, we're not big like sports people or forcing our kids to do sports, but I was like, you guys need to do something active. What do you want to do? And my sons told me I want to learn how to fight. So I said, okay. So put their butts in jujitsu a couple times a week. But that diversity is good because they wrestle and beat each other up, and they think they're the toughest thing in the world. Well, it's a little bit different when you're 4 going against an 8-year-old, and they get to train with different age kids and learn things and learn discipline, listen to directions. It would also deal with physical conflict, and you can't lose your cool. If you lose your cool in jiu-jitsu, you're probably going to get choked out or lose it. So that it's having something to where physical training is really important as well. Should not be the number one thing, but it will severely reduce your body overreacting to stress. If you're at least used to doing manual labor every day and sweating your butt off and doing something extra than just sitting on the couch and watching TV, you're going to be leagues ahead of the average person because they're not used to that.
Most no, and what do you have to do to get away usually? Mm-hmm. Think about that physically. You gotta, if you're in your house, you gotta crawl out a window, maybe not out a door. You're not necessarily going out the front door. Maybe you are. You may have to break a window and go through it. You may have to run up a hill. You may have to run up a hill carrying a child.
Yeah.
You run up a hill carrying something 50 pounds. It's way different than running up a hill by yourself, and running up a hill ain't easy.
That's right.
You might have to do it barefoot because you don't have time to put shoes on. Like if you're woken up in the middle of the night, what does that look like? So that's something we had SHTF Fitness at Self-Reliance Festival, and he had a physical challenge. Like if you can't run a mile, you got some work to do, man.
Yeah, I hear it from the guys, and they're like, oh, I got this and all the guns and that. And I said, yeah, if I invited you to come run 2 miles with me, would you come if you had the time? And then they like kind of pause. I'm like, okay, you're obviously not ready. Like conflict isn't just you standing still or sitting behind a nice little, comfortable position. It requires you to move around, and usually at a fast pace. So if you're not ready to do that for at least a little bit, it's going to be a wake up call if that time comes.
So Jack Spirko had a guest on, and she had somebody break into her house in the middle of the night, and she'd done multiple trainings at Tactical Response in Camden. So she knew, like, from a training standpoint, what to do. And she said, despite all of that, having gone through the situation, I want to share my story because I'm a normal person. I'm not like a tactical military dude. I don't have military training. And some of the things that she covered were really interesting. She's like, it was good that I'd done the training because I knew what to do to keep the person from hurting me. She ended up like holding him at gunpoint until the police came and, communicated with the police. She said things I didn't think of were like, what you wear to bed matters because I'm standing there butt naked, holding somebody at gunpoint, trying to scramble around with one arm, maybe get a shirt on because the police are going to get here and see me naked. And so she went into a lot of those sorts of things. And at the end of the day was very dissatisfied with the investigation that happened afterwards of somebody breaking into her house because it was a woman who broke into her house.
Mm.
And came to find out later, some of the more petty gangs will send women in on purpose because they're less likely to get messed up.
Yeah, or to get prosecuted fully as well.
Right. At the same time, how likely are women who shoot somebody in self-defense to get prosecuted compared to men? Do you
I
know
would
that
say
one?
much less likely.
More.
Really?
Yeah, so if you shoot somebody and kill them in self-defense and you are female, you are more likely to actually go to jail to be prosecuted for it.
Oh wow. Well,
And
that's
that
weird.
is,
I'm used to Texas though.
yeah,
We have self defense. I should say we're an outlier because
yeah,
we have self defense shootings all the time. I mean, I can't go a day without hearing. Well, not but periodically I hear about it all the time. Even the neighboring counties, like there was one, a neighbor had a machete, tried to break into his neighbor's house. I mean, just lit the guy up. I mean, it was completely justified. But yeah, that makes sense though.
yeah. I think it's a societal opinion of who should be defending, right?
Yeah, it's sad.
And so if you, to your point, if you don't know the letter of the law in your state and you push it a little bit, even if you were frightened for your life,
Mm-hmm.
if you are female, you need to know that you may go to jail for this and actually serve time.
Yeah.
Somebody else told me, we were talking the other day, they're like, and if you use a gun in self-defense, even if you're in the right, you are still going to jail that night. And you need to know because they're going to go through their process. And part of that process is you're getting arrested.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that really,
like, who's
really,
your lawyer? Do you know who you're going to call?
yep. That really depends on where you live, but definitely be aware of how, what leaning your counties are where you live. That's one of the things that drew me here was the amount of private land and that self defense is looked at as a true right. Maybe not in like Austin, but anywhere else. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to find a place and hard to find a scenario where you see anybody go for what's clearly a self defense shooting. Now, if you're living somewhere where you can't really trust that, don't say anything and lawyer up right away.
Yeah.
I mean, do not that may mean you need to spend a couple nights in jail. Okay, fine, but that's better than you getting convicted for wrongfully
For
convicted for
talking.
protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And I've seen situations where people have been completely upfront, like, no, this is what happened. I shot him, and I've seen that guy walk that night.
Mm-hmm.
Right
I don't
then.
think that happens in my state, but
So
yeah.
hopefully Tennessee will hold tight.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Tennessee, some states allow you to protect your property too. Tennessee is not one of those states.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is definitely in fear for your life. And one of the lines that the police talk to me about is if they are in your house going after you, you're in a much better position to defend self-defense than if it's in your backyard.
Yeah.
And so they're like, do with that what you will. and I'm like, well, hopefully nothing ever. That's my goal.
Yeah,
Nothing
exactly.
ever. So, all right. Okay. So I see that, yeah, like I know you from self-sufficiency and self-reliance sort of events. What attracts you to that, those sorts of cultures, to further your strategic home defense efforts with people?
Yeah, I see. Most of the people we're meeting at events like this, something that since we moved to Texas, we've got more interested in and getting more land. We did that and becoming more self reliant and finding people to trade with, whether it be because like I don't have cattle or anything, so or just certain skills that you can. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like such a new world because good. If I'm trading, there's no way to track what interactions I'm having with people, so that's great. The less
Yeah.
people know, the better, right?
Yeah.
So just having those abilities to know that, hey, I have a skill that's useful. And there's other people that I can either learn other skills from. And it's just such a great, I think there's kind of a misnomer about the prepper or the self-reliant people is that like, we're all paranoid and like, we don't get along with anybody. But like, I've never been to events where I've made more friends and had a great time with people and, in fellowship and hanging out, just talking around the fire about whatever. And it just, the culture is amazing. It's so friendly to everybody. There's people there that you could tell like they probably never have, picked a tomato. Okay. and they're it's kind of their image, but it's awesome to see people waking up to, being more independent. But when you're being more independent, you're really not more independent. You're just meeting people that are also independent, and you can help each other. And it's a really cool. I don't want to call it a movement. That sounds cheesy, but like just a fellowship of people that are like minded and want to be successful and not have to rely on the government. Which who wants that, right? That is like the opposite of what a successful person should want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're finding that those people are they're realizing that there are real threats out there to us being independent. There are people in the world that don't want, especially people in the U.S. relying on themselves and creating their own economy and creating their own food and all these different things because that threatens the way of things. So, but there's just so much knowledge in all these people. There's people from every walk of life, from practicing law to pilots to people that have been farming for 40 or 50 years or designing new ways of, aquaponics and food forests and all this different stuff. There's a wealth of knowledge that can be gained from all these different, events and networking things going on. So it's been invaluable, not just for us, building clients, but learning ourselves and better preparing ourselves for the future as well.
Yeah, I find it interesting in these networks, which traditionally were fear-based, and some of the events are fear-based and always the next crisis. The networks I run in for self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and preparedness tend to revolve around we can build a better world. That's the core message, is we can build a better world. And part of that goes back to the Boy Scouts, be prepared for everything.
That's right.
And do it in a logical way. And how that has been spun in mainstream society is that we're, sitting in our toilet paper fort with guns defending it in 2020 because toilet paper was going to be out. And how it really is most people I know in these networks are either starting a journey of doing something for themselves from a business standpoint, taking control of their finances, learning how to eat healthier, learning how to get healthier. We have a lot of people coming in 300-400 pounds who I see them 2 years later and they're not skinny, but they're like 250 and, or 200 pounds. And that's a big deal. Like that's a big change. That's the difference between running that mile and running a block, maybe not even running a block. Right. And so, and that, I think that's because the culture has shifted from that terror to this is how we make a better world. And if we focus on the terror, we're never going to have the better world. And we want that better world.
Yeah. And the better world is something where everybody has, skills that could be actually valuable skills. Not like I can make posts on TikTok or Instagram, like actual marketable skills that I can share with other people and either teach them or we can teach each other and be useful, to my family and the community around me, have multiple income streams and not, be relying on some, corporation to pay my bills and then tax the living shit out of me. Right.
Right.
So the more we can do that and just build our own focus is just empowering. It's a lot of fun too. And it's a positive thing. It's not based off of fear. It's just looking at what's going on. We've seen the trend. We've seen these things come true. So let's readjust our course and go the other way and not give into that. So,
yeah, it's absolutely true. Okay, I have a question from Letty. What holster did you find? I think she was referring to me. And I'm very excited about the holster I finally found because I had a very bad time finding holsters for me. And it is an Eclipse holster. I think it's eclipseholsters.com. I did put the link in there. They actually had cards in our swag bag giveaways at Self-Reliance Festival because Amanda Willis loves them so much that she hounded them until they sent her business cards for those. But I got the recommendation from Amanda because she has gone through every holster in the world. John says they have a 55-gallon drum of holsters she has tried and hated. And I really have liked their quality. That doesn't mean they're the only one for women. Chuck Peoples just said he bought one of them too, and they're not just for women. But what I like about them is I don't get gun road rash from the stock of the gun, and they fit my curves better. And I have them. I have curves. So I can run a mile though, but I have curves. Probably could stand to lose.
Yeah,
Here.
I still got to pick my holsters carefully because I got some where they pull out my body hair. So I got to I got to make sure I get the right one that pulls out that
Yeah.
stomach. I'm like, man, I had one for a while. I'm like, I had to switch the way I carried it. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Take that into account, guys and gals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hair hurts. It's kind of like wearing chainmail in the wrong place.
That's right.
Don't do it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something, like that's a whole nother realm when you get into this. You have all of these things that you can have, but it's trial and error to some extent. But when somebody's gone through the trial and error, definitely try their recommendations, because even if it doesn't work for you, there's a reason they went through it. Because I used to have like the belly band one that I was just telling somebody, like, I hate that thing. But sometimes it's the only way to carry under a dress that doesn't show.
Yeah, that's got to be.
It's like a girdle. Okay, here's my girdle holster.
Sounds like a lot of work to get on.
I thought we left that behind last century, but no.
Exactly.
Not the case.
Exactly.
Not the case. Okay. All right. So if people want to know more about you and just find out how your training works, how engagements work with you, how do they get a hold of you?
There's so many ways. Easiest way, strategichomedefense.com. You can email us, message us right from there. If you're on social media stuff, I try to be better about that. You can DM us on there. I've gotten suppressed a few times, but I'm still active. I am on Instagram, simple at Strategic Home Defense. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Yeah.
I'm not really on Facebook much, but you could probably get us on there. And then, those are the easiest ways. And as soon as you shoot us a message and you want the information, we'll give you a call. We'll give you a quote right there and find out what you need. So we're all about engaging people. And once you're our client forever. And if you ever have things that you think need adjusted or have questions about your consultation, we will respond to you for eternity or until Steve Files, no longer here. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Steve, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Are you good staying on to answer some more questions? Because I see.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the audio podcast. Okay. Chuck says, what's your suggestion to harden exterior doors and windows in a home? And guys, if you have questions, put them in all caps. We'll let Steve stay and then we'll let him go.
Yeah, I'll hang out, Chuck. Appreciate the question. So exterior doors. So first thing I would do, if you don't have a true solid core door, like steel or a good solid wood, change to that. On top of that, there's a couple different options. The easiest one that I found, I've tested out probably like 5 or 6 different products for making doors pry-proof, like ram-proof, basically to the point where if you have a good frame and a good solid door, you're going to need explosives to breach the door and probably an axe and a chainsaw. I recommend Door Armor. They are pretty affordable. For most exterior doors, for like their max thing is like $120, maybe $130, and I think their shipping is always free. They make solid stuff, and you just got to make sure, measure the distance between the door and the jamb. Okay. The door and the frame, and make sure there's 2 different spacers for like the steel pry plates. And you can customize the color to pretty much whatever your finishes are on your door, so it doesn't like look out of place or weird. But they have like 3 or 4 different ones. Easy to put in, takes like 10 minutes to install on each door. And if you have the opportunity and have a spare door frame that can test one out, get one and test it out, and you'll see what a pain in the butt these things are to get through. They're tough. And even for interior doors, you'd have to just basically bust a hole through the interior door to get through it. So, but all it is creating time. So time is valuable. So that's why I definitely recommend it. It's easy to put on and a minimal investment. So,
well, I understand if you are a horror character with an axe named Jason, you can totally go right through interior doors pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. I think I could, if I tried to, I think I could run. If I just dove head first, I could probably get through some of the ones.
The hollow cores.
Yeah, just right through. I might get my face cut up pretty good, but
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I have worked with somebody that they make a product called Terror Stop Lock, which is designed for commercial doors to lock them down from the inside if you are trying to lock a threat out.
Yep.
And those deploy in like 30 or 45 seconds. They deploy really fast. And it's just, I think you can get them for your home as well, but they just attach to the frame, and then it's just like, boom, nobody can get in unless you let them in, or they destroy the door, to your point. But it takes more to destroy a door than you think, even with an axe, even if your name is Jason and you are in a movie called Halloween. But all right.
It all depends on the door.
It does all depend on the door.
On the door.
Those 1900 era, like solid core doors, are even better inside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions coming up. Thanks for making time. As I said, this will go out Sunday, guys. And thanks for making time for us today, Steve.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I hope to hear from some of you guys, and stay prepared.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.